Yeah, this is an example of a person who's not ready for office. I mean, left, right, black, brown, white, I don't care who you are. If you look at a problem like a school shooting where kids are being killed and you say, well, that's just the way it is, then you don't deserve to be in charge.
It's an election year in the US, and I note that in response to this latest school shooting, J.D. Vance, who is on the ticket with Donald Trump, he's his vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party, has said that school shootings are, quote, a fact of life, and has called for security in classrooms, not gun control, in order to try to prevent them. I suppose inadvertently he is correct. They are a fact of life, but I don't think that was necessarily the point he was making.
Yeah, this is an example of a person who's not ready for office. I mean, left, right, black, brown, white, I don't care who you are. If you look at a problem like a school shooting where kids are being killed and you say, well, that's just the way it is, then you don't deserve to be in charge. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. All I care about is saving another kid's life so a family doesn't have to endure what we did. And that is just tone deaf. And it's outrageous to say something like that, this casual brush off. It's almost like they created the problem by just not passing some simple common sense gun laws. And now that the problem is here, they say, well, what can we do? We've got a 500 million guns in the United States, so we're just going to see this happen all the time. It's unacceptable. And you know what's the greatest proof is go to England. You know, I was there a little while ago. I've traveled all over Europe. I feel much safer there. Just a lot fewer gun deaths per thousand. There's just a much lower gun death rate. I'm sure it happens. But here in the United States, it's like we had one just one town over. Our son was in this town, another town over. There was a shooter that got was on a rampage, 5 kilometers from here. So we're seeing it everywhere. And J.D. Vance really just needs to go, and maybe he's a good author or something like that. But I would cry, honestly cry, if this guy gets elected because he's going to set us back even further.
As with all of these conversations, when we have them on our radio station, these sorts of issues almost feel quite far away for most of us when it comes to gun violence in the US. And I think one thing about this particular story is the arrest of the suspect. Excuse me, the arrest of the father of the suspect in this incident. And I just wonder if I could get a take from you on how surprised you are, how unusual that is that there is a kind of family suggestion of implication here.
I'm happily surprised. We're starting to see this as a trend. Americans are getting so tired of seeing their kids' schools get shot up and their kids get shot and their friends get shot. And what is amazing about what's happening now is that people are saying, where did this gun come from? And in the past, no one cared. They would go, oh yeah, that was acquired legally. The father got it and kid went to school and killed 16 people. Now they're starting to say, well, how can that be correct if a father gives a troubled teenager a gun at the age of 14 with massive firepower? So we are happy, and we think it has something to do with the fact that there's a coalition here in the United States fighting really hard to have laws that are similar to what we see in Europe, where you have to lock your guns up if you have little kids in the house or curious teenagers. So we're really happy about that. I mean, if you can use the term happy, we're relieved to see, I guess you could say, people finally realizing it's about safe storage. It's about where those guns are coming from. 76% of the time they're coming from a family a gun area that's not secured. A kid walks in, is mad, sad, feeling disturbed, and horrible things happen because someone didn't take 2 seconds to lock up a gun. So we're really excited to see this starting to happen.
I suppose that's a notable line that you're walking there because I suppose of the difficulties, the sensitivities around gun control. So actually, what you're suggesting is that people need to store their guns more safely, and perhaps that is more palatable to those who want to buy guns.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about our issue, well, we do think it should be required. We think it should be a law, as it is in most European countries, Japan, countries with very low gun death rates. We feel like it's the logical thing that everyone's missed. They have talked about bans, they have talked about many important things. We think all of these laws are good to look at, but safe storage impacts these school shootings directly, and it can be shown 76% of the time they're getting the gun from school. So yeah, we don't mind saying it out loud. We think gun owners, we think the vast majority of gun owners would be in favor of this law. We think a very small percentage of Americans, 20% or so, who are just rabid about never having any responsibility as it relates to their firearms, we think their time has come and gone because kids are dying.
This is Ethan's Law that you're talking about, named after your son. Tell us about Ethan and tell us about Ethan's Law.
Yeah, there's many of these laws in motion, but Ethan's law is probably one of the most has the most momentum. It passed in the House of Representatives, and it ran into Republican, opposition in the Senate. So it actually has passed. It almost became a law in the United States. We met with Joe Biden in the Oval Office. He said, "I will sign Ethan's law if it gets to my desk." This means that there is just a small group of people opposing it. So my kid went to a friend's house and the father was a big gun guy and he had his guns in the front hall closet, places where the kids knew they were and they were not locked up. A lot of people try to spin that around and say, well, they were in a cardboard box, and we're like a cardboard box and a bunch of curious kids. So this guy tried to teach our kids how to shoot without asking the parents permission. The guns were easily grabbed within the house. His son started to think it was really cool to be showing off these weapons to his friends, and the next thing we knew, our kid was dead. And it was about as easily preventable a thing, and just tossing it in a new gun safe they open with a fingerprint, just like your smartphone opens. And I can only tell you that it's unimaginable the impact of losing a child, in the prime of his life, 15 years old. This kid was a very special person. He was loved by our community. There was a huge outpouring of support. Ethan was an unusual kid, very interested in things that other kids weren't. He was very interested in the Holocaust and wanted to help it to never happen again. And he had so many touch points in our community. So when we lost him, it was like falling off a cliff. It's just the worst thing that could happen to a parent. And my only advice to any parent that gets in a similar situation is you lose that child, you have to come up with a mission to honor their lives. It's just I don't think there's any other pathway that you can walk. So here's my mission. If we in the United States can follow the example set by Europe, by many, many other parts of the world, we could save thousands of lives, prevent these school shootings, which are just horrific. And even worse problem that we have in the US is we have a gun suicide rate that's much higher because the easy access to guns. So when I think of my son Ethan, every day I get up and I go, how would Ethan want me to live my life? He'd want me to stay up and talk to you and try to move the needle and save a life.
Mike, I mean, you just speak so eloquently about, such an awful moment, such an awful thing. And what you're doing with Ethan's Law is remarkable. Can you just give us, I suppose, a couple of the headlines as to what Ethan's Law would do? Because to my mind, for example, is it as simple as if somebody is buying a gun, they are obliged to buy some sort of safe storage facility to go alongside it? What would Ethan's Law achieve?
Yeah, well, Ethan's Law can be even simpler than that. It can be if you have kids in your home, say kids 18 years and younger, and you do not secure your weapons in a way that would prevent them from gaining access to them, then if a terrible accident happens, like happened to our child in a neighbor's home, then you'd be responsible for that, And I think what's shocking to us is that some people think the parents shouldn't be responsible for the death of a child in their home. And in fact, what happened in our very progressive state of Connecticut here in the United States, the guy wasn't charged with so much as a parking ticket. We couldn't. There was no law that was there to put this guy, although it seems like it was gross negligence. So flash forward, the world has been hearing about these things. We've been out pounding the pavement, particularly my wife, Kristen, has been just everywhere talking about this. And guess what? People are starting to say, wait a second, this is the parent's responsibility. So Ethan's Law basically says secure your gun when there are kids in the home. The gun should be secured, whether it's loaded or unloaded, and it should result in either a misdemeanor or preferably a felony, which would be a longer sentence, which would really get people's attention. So in Connecticut, in my state, it's a felony. In Texas, it's a misdemeanor. But in 30 or so states, there's no law whatsoever. And Georgia has no real safe storage law at all. That's the state where this most recent school shooting happened. And so they have nothing. And some legislators there are so proud of that, and it's just killing kids. It's killed kids in their own community. So that's what Ethan's Law is about. Now, there is in most countries, just say, look, if you have firearms, you should secure them.
Mm.
Certainly in our military, you do. So we're for that. And most of our friends who own guns are like, of course. But there is a really strange brand of an American person who says, "Oh no, I want to leave my guns lying around because then I can
Yeah.
grab them." And you're like, "So can your kids grab them too?" So it's a
Yeah.
really strange conversation we're having, but we're starting to win because of what we're seeing in Georgia. This also happened in Michigan, where the parents were held responsible.